This is a tutorial on using the Cura slicing software for the Lulzbot TAS 6 in the Digital Learning Lab. This is the screen that you should be looking at when you open up Cura. You'll see that there are a few sections on this screen. The green buttons on the left are the opening files and editing tools. Here in the middle is your workspace. It gives you a virtual representation of the print bed on our Lulzbot TAS 6. On the upper right, there are some view tools. And then on the right, there are print setup settings. The first thing that you want to do is upload your OBJ or STL file. In the upper left-hand corner, there is open file, and you can find that from your flash drive or your computer. Open it, and it'll automatically put your model onto the workspace. A few things in terms of maneuvering. If you hold down right-click, this will give you the ability to orbit around. If you hold down the middle mouse wheel, this gives you the ability to pan. If you do not have a mouse wheel, holding down Shift and then also holding down right click gives you that ability as well. To be able to utilize any of the green tools that are on the left, you must have your item clicked. So you're going to click your model, and the first thing it's going to show you is the move. There's two ways to move onto the build plate. You can click and hold the arrows and move them, or you can type in the coordinates here on the left, and it will move them across the build plate. If you notice, if you move in the Z direction, which is blue, up, it will snap it back down to the build plate because 3D models need to be printed onto the build plate. The second option is scale. Also, let's say you model something and it didn't come out to the exact size. As it's clicked, you can see the exact sizes in each dimension. So it's 16 millimeters tall. It is about 24 millimeters wide in the red direction. And then in the green direction, it is 43 millimeters. So I can scale by, much like what I did with the move. I can drag the box in that particular direction and it will scale. If you do not like how you scaled it, you can hit the reset button that's on the left. Currently, it's selected as uniform scaling, so what movement I make in one direction will change all other directions equally. If I only want to change one direction, so let's say I want to make this person taller, I need to uncheck uniform scaling, and then I can go in and only change that one dimension. You can also change specifically, say I want it 50 millimeters wide, I can type that, or let's say I just want to double it, I can do certain percentages. What it's showing you now is that this item is a little bit too big for the build plate, is extended beyond that. It will tell you that it's unable to slice it because of that. So it changes it into this striped pattern line, and it will give you this warning here at the bottom. So please be aware of that. Undo, click 3. 3 gives you the ability to rotate. I can rotate in any axes, and it will automatically again snap to the build plate. You'll notice that sometimes it goes under the build plate. It cannot print under the build plate, so it will snap it up. You can also type the degrees here on the left. You can reset if you don't like how you rotated it. And then depending on how I rotate it, this last one is lay flat. This will give it the ability to lay as flat as possible onto the build plate based off of your rotation. The fourth one is mirror. So if you start clicking these, it will mirror it in that direction. The red direction doesn't make sense because it's kind of symmetrical. Green, it flips, and the other one, blue, makes more sense because it'll flip it. So if you're ever trying to mirror something, you can do it with this particular tool. Also, a lot of things have the reset button, but just in case you do not see it, Control-Z will undo. These 3 buttons do not matter unless you're doing something complex. Ask a DLL student worker if you need to use these 3 buttons. And then the last one is multiply objects. So let's say you want multiple after editing of one model, you can select, okay, I want one copy. It'll automatically make a copy and stick it onto the build plate. So I can have multiple copies, maybe I want 2 more. It will then add those in. So let's say you're zooming and you kind of have no idea where you're at. These view tools on here can help you. This first one brings everything back into perspective at this particular angle, and this shows you particular views. So there's the front view, top, left, right, and bottom. One view I want to make you aware of is that it's currently in solid view, but you can also look at it in layer view. This will show you each individual layer for your print. So here it will show you that there are going to be 63 layers for this particular print, and I can actually take the slider and see each individual layer as I'm going through the print. You can even pick a layer and hit play, and it will show how the nozzle is going to print that particular layer for you. And then you can hit pause. Going back to solid view, the last thing I want to show you are all the print setup settings here on the right. Category will stay the same. Material you want to make sure is Polylight PLA. This is what we use for the Lulzbot TAS6 printers. You'll know that it's wrong if this green color is not showing up. So I'm going to click a different one, Engine. It changes it to red. So you know that you're on a different filament. You want to make sure that the material is the Polylight PLA. Each material melts at a different temperature, cools at a different temperature. This setting tells the printer what to do. Profile is in regards to what quality that you want. If you're wanting something very quick and don't care what it looks like, high speed is there for you. It shows you the layer thickness. So this one is 0.38, so it's a thicker layer. Standard is 0.25, a little bit thinner, and then high detail is 0.18. So a little bit more detail, but more layers to print out what you want. I'm going to go back to layer view so that you can see this change. Standard is 63 layers. If I change the high speed, you'll see that it's 42 layers and that the change is here at the bottom. The time exists. It says 11 minutes. I'm going to go back to standard. If this box keeps appearing, you want to make sure that you always say keep. Going back to standard. Now it's 15 minutes. The layers are a little bit more thin, a little bit better detail, which means you have more time for print. And our highest detail is going to now print at 88 layers and take 19 minutes. So keep that in mind for how much time a print is going to take and how many layers that you want in terms of detail. The last thing you want to make sure that you do, and I'll go back to high speed for this, is change 3 settings. What you will see is under recommended is that there are a lot of things that you can do here, but they do not work. There is a glitch in the system, so you'll actually have to go into custom. So if you go into custom, there's a lot here, but you're only worried about 3. The first one is infill, a certain percentage of infill. 3D prints are not completely solid. They fill in the interior volume with air and a little bit of plastic. To show you what I mean by that, I'm going to throw in another model of a bowling pin. So that you can see this example. And every time you add something in and make a change, it's always going to slice it different and give you an update. So I'm going to go into layer view, which I am in, and I'm going to go a little bit into the bowling pin. What you see here is infill. You can see that it is not solid. I can look down in it. It's going to make those lines. So this is technically a 20% infill. If I change it to 50, you're going to get a lot more lines, and it's going to take a lot more time to print. Therefore, it's going to be a little bit heavier, and possibly a little bit more sturdy. As you can see, way more lines. So the interior volume of this bowling pin is filled up to 50% as compared to the 20. Ideally for prints, you want to make sure that it's 20 to 30, unless you're needing something with a little bit of heft or something that's a little bit more strong than another print. Ask a student worker about infills. Just know that more infill leads to more time and more filament. Get rid of the bowling pin. So infill, set it to 20 to 30. The next one is supports. You want to make sure that generate supports are on. Have that checked. You know you will need supports if you look anywhere on the model and you see red. So I'm going to flip down to the bottom. You see here that this is red. Well, of course, this section is red, but it's going to be supported by the build plate. The legs are floating up in the air. It needs to print plastic underneath that for it to then be able to print that solid. I'm going to go back to layer view, and it's actually going to show you that, in fact, these are the supports that it's going to print, and then be able to print your model actually on top of that. A rule of thumb is to probably always generate supports unless you're looking at a model and it tells you no supports. You may go through the print and realize that it does need supports, and if you have it unchecked, it's not going to print it and your print will fail. And then the last thing is build plate adhesion. You want to make sure it's set to skirt and that you have the line count as 2. Skirt just draws filament around your model. So you can see here, there's this skirt. It's basically a circle around your model. It's going to draw it twice. That's to get the filament going. You must have a skirt at all times, unless you have a model that asks for a brim or a raft, but you must have some sort of build plate adhesion. And then those are the settings that you want to have. You can check the time, and then you can have see how many grams it's going to take. And then what you will do is save this to the SD card that is on the Lulzbot TAS6.